This podcast is recorded on stolen and unceded Aboriginal land.
We acknowledge the First Nations and elders of this country, and we join their calls for justice.
Are you ready? Big Tom?
Yes, Little Emerald? Ready to go. See, we look the same size here.
You
we
look
seem normal
so
here.
normal size on my screen.
We caught up. For people to know, we caught up in person for the first time this week, and then we posted a little photo. I think it was your idea. You wanted to illustrate the size differential as we were having bubble tea in Brisbane. Yes.
Yeah. Like, we noticed it immediately, right? Like, you walk up the steps and we were sort of like looking at each other like, why are you so big and small respectively? And then I think, yes, at one point we were standing next to each other and it was just, oh, that's right. I was also wearing heels.
You were wearing heels, yes.
And I took my heels off to, like, in the bubble tea establishment, I just took my shoes off in order to find out the real size differential. We captured it. We shared it with the internet. People can't believe it.
We have met in person before, back in 2019 when I interviewed you for my podcast. And there hasn't been a huge change. I've gotten fatter since then, but it wasn't.
Have you grown? You wouldn't have grown in. Our heights should be the same.
What are you, my grandma?
Maybe I'm shrinking, but I'm not. Like, I think that I don't seem as small as I am. And only when I'm in it is often when I look at photos of myself near, like with other people, I look small. And I'm like, whoa.
How tall are you?
I don't know. I feel like I'm like 150 something centimeters.
Yeah. See, I'm 195.
Hey, you're 195.
Uh-huh.
That's almost 2 meters.
So the question, yes, is Tom big or is Emerald small? And the answer is...
Well, that's what everyone kept asking. And I kept saying it's a secret.
We'll never tell.
Talk about the Greens, that bunch of idiots.
This is the thing the Greens are founded on, this freakish, nutty sort of, caveman and woman view of the world.
They hate our society.
If you want the dole for life, free marijuana, vote Greens.
Frankly, I've always found the Greens to be a real serious danger to Australia.
Serious danger to Australia.
Oh, well, it's a pleasure to be back, everyone. This is Serious Danger, a podcast about green politics in Australia. It is not an official Green Party podcast. It's the official podcast of big units and little elves.
Little elves. Welcome back, Tom.
Thank you very much, Emerald. I missed you.
I missed you.
Some great co-hosts while I was away.
I think so. Yeah, they did a good job, but, they weren't big. They weren't that big. Only average size.
How puny they were. No, I was away writing my little book, which is still not finished, but is very close. It's much closer than it used to be, and I'll be banging on about that later in the year, I'm sure. Can you wait? Can you contain your excitement about reading my book, Emerald?
We should move on.
Okay. This is made possible with the help of the Green Institute, this podcast, that is, and produced by the Griffin. No, the book is not produced by the Green Institute at all. I want to say a huge thank you and shout out to our patrons who have signed up at patreon.com/seriousdangerau and made this show possible. Thank you so much to James, Jason, Mitchell, Tom, Linda, James, another James, Constance, Kenon, Joe, Simone, and an account called Oh No, Not This Again, I Refuse.
Who's that directed at? Anyway, we appreciate you.
Whoever it is, hey, we've got your money. That's the main thing. Just $3 a month can help us keep the lights on here at Serious Danger Inc. Help us pay Michael Griffin, helps us cover costs. Please do it if you believe, and you can spare it. We understand that that's not everybody. Serious Danger AU on Patreon. Get involved, y'all.
Get into it.
One of the worst things about Australian politics is the way it works to make some of the greatest injustices and outrages seem perfectly normal and reasonable. Like a sedative, it dulls the senses, and it relies on a certain logic. What is considered possible isn't determined by what actually is possible with the resources our country has to hand, but instead the major parties, media and various public and private institutions work to constrain the scope of political debate into an ever-narrowing band. One determined not by what everyday people want, need or believe, but by the interests of the billionaires and multinational corporations that Parliament ultimately serves.
Big Greens Week. Big Greens Week.
I actually just realised, though, I don't feel entirely comfortable continuing the show. I noticed you're not wearing a tie.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah.
I thought this was a barbecue. Am I wrong?
Well, at barbecues where we typically arrive in a state of undress, it's fine.
Yes.
But
not
in
this
other
nation's
places,
beautiful parliament. Yes.
Yeah, the institution of parliament, we must respect it by slinging a tie around our neck and choking ourselves into a wonderful performance in legislative capacity.
We should say we're going to get into the nitty gritty of like the climate bill and like consequential legislating moves and
Yeah, we're gonna
strategy and all
talk
that
about
kind of
that
stuff. And you're going to hear from Wil Anderson as well. It's going to be a great episode. But let's talk about Tiregate. It's very important. Max Chandler-Mather got up in Parliament and asked a question. I think it was when he was asking a question to the Prime Minister, right? During Homelessness Week about the lack of public housing, pointing out the hypocrisy between Anthony Albanese always talking about how the fact he grew up in public housing, but his policies aren't doing enough to address the housing crisis, which is affecting people's lives, millions of people's lives across this country in our fucked housing market. And Nationals MP Pat Conaghan decided to interject and appeal to the Speaker and say that this is a disgrace because he wasn't wearing a tie.
To the member for Griffin.
The Prime Minister. Prime Minister, you often speak about the role of public housing in your life.
Order. The member for Griffith will resume his seat. The member for Cowper.
Mr Speaker, I draw your attention to the state of undress of the member.
Resume your seat. Resume your seat. That's not a point of order. Resume your seat. Order. Order. I'll give the call to the member for Griffith. The member for Latrobe. Order. The member for Griffith will be heard in silence.
Prime Minister.
Yeah, he called like a point of order, right? A point of order. He said that the member is in a state of undress. And the Speaker was like, mate, no point of order. Shut the fuck up.
Nice.
But yeah, this Nationals MP who we were saying, like, never heard of this person before. I don't know if they've ever got any other national media. This is what they got media for. And what better fucking gift to the Greens than this, like, making someone look like an actual person, a human being. And for the record, yeah, the question was, isn't it the fact that under your government, the social housing wait list will continue to grow? Something to that effect. Never got an answer, of course.
Of course not. Well, good to try these things, though. It was also ironic because in his first speech, which we might talk about a little bit later on too, Max said he had a line about...
Technically, I should be kicked out of Parliament if I don't dress like a businessman. But you're more than welcome to vote for laws that materially benefit corporations that also happen to donate millions of dollars to your political party.
Pointing out, the ridiculousness, the pageantry of Parliament, where the priorities are, on a speech that was broadly talking about how our politics are run by billionaires and rich people and corporations, just sort of saying this is where this place's priorities at. This is fucked up. And then, during a question about the public housing crisis in this country, a Conservative got up and said, but he's not wearing a tie.
What's this quote? Was this then a media statement that this Pat Nationals MP...
Pat Conaghan then released a statement after the...
Oh my God. Oh my God.
This is not a barbecue. This is question time in the Australian Parliament. What next? Board shorts and thongs?
Sorry, and can we just pause it there because it's like question time in the Australian Parliament, that like bastion of dignity that every Australian watches and just like feels so much respect for. Like not the biggest fucking waste of time in history. But anyway, go on.
Maybe a onesie in winter. Some may say that it's a minor matter to not comply with the dress standard, but what it says to many, including me, is that there is little respect for the tradition and history of our parliament. Now, before this incident, Pat Conaghan expected the Greens to respect Australian tradition and the integrity and respect and dignity of the Australian Parliament. And now Max didn't wear a thing around his fucking neck, and that's all ruined. Yeah,
well, here's the thing. We don't respect the tradition and history of the Parliament. It's a bad place where bad decisions have been made. Like, that's fucking true. Yeah. I mean... It's, and this is about like the dress code in Parliament. And someone pointed out, I think Stephen Bates pointed this out, a few other people pointed this out, that according to that same dress code, women shouldn't show their shoulders in Parliament. The female MPs, not allowed to show their shoulders. God forbid. No one could fucking concentrate.
Again, that's another rule that I've introduced for our podcast recordings. But I think that's just... I don't want to get too horny during these chats.
That's why you'll notice I never show my shoulders in the video.
And thank you for abiding by the rules.
Did you see all the takes after this incident, though? There were so many, like, obviously it's the kind of thing that media fucking love. And we even got a fashion editorial in the 9 Fairfax papers from their fashion editor, Damien Woolnough. I don't know if that's how you pronounce his name. The headline was, "The tie is dead. Here's how men can still dress well with a free neck." And it's like this fashion advice thing. This is the most fucking, it is the most insane article. I mean, first of all, the picture that they use, it's the picture of Max delivering his question time. He looks nice enough, but then they put a picture of David Pocock, fucking like very hot senator, big unit, next to him because he's also not wearing a tie. And I think that's quite cruel. Like it makes Max look so small. It's like you and me next to each other, these two photos. And they even say,
Max, do you even lift, bro?
The article, the second paragraph says Pocock's significantly sized neck was unburdened by a tie, with the budding politician wearing a bright blue suit and crisp white shirt. Like his significantly sized neck. Incredible journalism. And it goes on to talk about how like you don't have to wear a tie anymore, but you can still look smart. And on the scale, like in the scheme of missing the point, this article is really up there. It goes on to interview a bunch of stylists and designers, including the person that used to style Paul Keating, who has a label called Mandatory. The A at the start is missing and it's all in capitals. That's Mandatory is the brand. I had a look on their website. Their cheapest shirts start at $180, just a cool, most normal people going to their regular job, working class people just buying a $180 shirt. And I'm not talking, that's not a fancy shirt. They have a singlet that's $120. And then they range up to like just jackets that are thousands of dollars.
What did he did Zegna's suits, right? Keating had this big thing with
maybe did he?
Own suits that was always like regularly pointed to champion of the working class. Not neoliberal or anything like that.
No, that's the fucking point. The reason that Max brought this up in his first speech was to like point out that most ordinary fucking people have do not connect to a place where you have to wear a fucking tie, let alone where you have to be able to afford. Like I can imagine Max has maybe he's just been paid now. I don't know. It took a while for them to sort out the pay, I think, when you get elected. But before that, he would have been like, fuck, I need to buy a suit that I can wear in Parliament. And I imagine it would have been kind of hard to afford because ordinary people can't afford this shit. And yet the recommendation towards the end of this article from this fucking stylist, design consultant, whatever, is like, you don't want to wear buttons on your shirt because that would be considered too casual. You can wear a pocket square. Long gone are the days when you had to match your pocket square to your tie. Silk is still considered more formal than cotton. The solution. Max is going to show up in question time next week with a pocket square. That'll be much better. Fucking like representative parliament. Jesus Christ.
Hey, bow tie? Question mark? How about that? Maybe that mix that up a little bit. Be young conservative, chic.
Yeah. Far out.
All right, there was that. There was obviously the other incident in which Naughty Greens showed some disrespect to our beautiful, wonderful parliament and all its traditions. Lidia Thorpe in the Senate swearing in, giving a shout out to our colonising queen.
Yes.
Elizabeth II, very cool. You got to read out this little oath. She steps up. She says,
I, Sovereign Lidia Thorpe, do solemnly and sincerely affirm and declare that I will be faithful and I bear true allegiance to the colonising Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
Senator Thorpe.
And everyone's like, don't say that. Don't call her a coloniser. Stop it. Lizzie, we don't mean it.
Everyone's like, you're not a real senator if you don't properly do it again.
I love that. You can't be in our club if you don't go through our weird ritual. swear allegiance to the most popular girl in school who doesn't even actually go here.
She did it again and did a very salty read of the second time around too. It was just like, I do sincerely, and then said hairs instead of heirs. I think deliberately like fucking it up, showing no respect whatsoever.
Yeah.
Hairs.
It was good shit. I love how in the response there was no one was trying to actually like deny colonialism. Like no one was.
Everyone's
you
like,
can't mount
true, but you
the
can't
argument
say
whatsoever that this country was colonized. Yes, it was. That is the truth. Please don't say it. That's very rude.
Yeah.
Jacinta Price, the Conservative senator, said that was like childish or whatever. And of course, earlier in the week, you had Pauline Hanson walking out on an acknowledgement of country in the Senate too, because she's a fucking racist loser.
And that's not childish.
But it was great. I mean, you know, across the board, and including in Max's speech as well, and I think in all the first speeches, I've got through most of them over the past week. It is Greens MPs celebrating their win, emphasising the community campaigns and the dissatisfaction, disillusionment with current politics, and a real critique of this parliament,
yes.
and really laying out how this institution is not serving people, and we're not just going to respect it for the sake of it. You know, respect needs to be earned, and at the moment, Parliament does not earn anybody's respect. So fuck it.
Yeah. And I think this is a discussion we should have maybe at some point. But the way that the Greens work in Parliament may change now that we have a bunch of new MPs in the lower house who have constituencies to work in, as opposed to the Senate, where the majority of your work is in Parliament. These are people who, can really be like, well, Parliament is not where my real work is going to happen. It's going to happen in my community, as it should.
Bloody oath.
With their talk of clean coal and budget cuts, the new government is already sounding far too much like the old government for our liking. But the Greens want us to become a more equal country with a safer climate. We are not a rubber stamp. We will not be taken for granted. This is the critical decade for climate action, to tackle inequality and the cost of living crisis. The Greens will fight for a future for all of us.
But of course, the big story breakthrough was around, well, a few things, and we'll just talk about Adam's National Press Club speech on Wednesday, which touched on some few other things, and then obviously the big story of the week in regards to supporting Labor's climate bill. It was a great press club speech. I really recommend it if people have a chance. He spoke for half an hour. If you don't want to worry about questions, that's fine. But it was entitled "The Greens, the 47th Parliament." First of all, he called Stephen Bates Stephen Ryan right off the top, which I thought
didn't notice that. I must have missed that.
Yeah, there was a few laughs in the room.
Oopsie whoopsie. Did he correct himself?
No, he didn't. He's just sort of barreled on. There was a little bit of murmur in the crowd.
He probably didn't even realise because he would have been so.
Well, this is what I'm saying. The story here is that we've got too many Greens MPs that he can't remember everybody's names.
So true.
And I think that's very exciting. He had a great line talking about how, the Greens vote was up and said that this Greens vote is a floor, not a ceiling, which is a very.
Ooh. Is that? Yeah, that's really for us, isn't it? But
so for us.
Anyway.
I think it's a good line. But a few other things before we get to the climate bill. He was talking about the Greens are a source for social democracy, redistributing wealth. He was calling for a windfall tax on gas companies to fund free childcare and getting dental and mental health into Medicare. So, gas companies are making out like bandits. They're not paying any fucking tax. There's a cost of living crisis. Here are two really big, simple things that the government could do to make people's lives better immediately. In the UK, a Conservative government introduced a windfall tax. Everyone recognises these profits are coming out of nowhere. They're not doing anything to earn this. Origin and Santos did not invade Ukraine or have anything to do that. They just make out these massive profits because of these factors outside of their control. They're making that windfall. We should absolutely tax that windfall to make people's lives better. So that was good.
Yeah, tax them.
But also there was a little stash because he was sort of positioning Greens as the only ones left fighting for social democracy in our parliament, identified Labor as a centre-right party. He said you don't need ABC covers for that, but it's good to know. It's nice to have it confirmed. And called them neoliberals, which made Paul Keating very angry. Did you follow much of this, April?
Paul Keating of all people. I mean, I saw the exchange. It's so funny. I'm torn on this. What did Keating say? So he was like, he rejected the claim that Labor had pursued neoliberal policies like privatisation and engaged in an austerity budget policy. simply did. Keating said this is both a lie and a slur. Neoliberal is a slur, apparently. And more than that, the world's leading system of minimum award. The N-word. That's what people mean. The world's leading system of minimum award rates of pay, a safety net superintended by the Fair Work Commission, a Keating government creation. Again, hardly an exercise in neoliberalism. Keating is fucking famously the architect of neoliberalism and privatization under Labor. It's so funny that he could pretend that he's not. Oh, he said, but Bant is a bounder and a distorter of political truth. What is a bounder?
I don't know what a bounder is. I think that's one of those classic.
This is the Paul Keating thing, right? Like, it sounds good. And so that was the headline. Bant is a bounder. Does anyone know what that means? No.
He's still talking, yes. It's bizarrely the 80s, or even in the 80s, I think he was very old fashioned with all these references and stuff and the way he talks.
Yeah. Like, sometimes it's fun to watch, but like, again, former prime ministers, please fucking be quiet.
Shush, Annie. I mean, look, we talk about this regularly on the podcast. We should do an episode with Elizabeth Humphreys, that's for sure. She's a very kind listener and a fantastic writer who wrote How Labor Built Neoliberalism. I brought this up with Wayne Swan when I interviewed him for my podcast. The Labor Party cannot fully reckon with this history. They refuse to do so. Obviously, yes, Medicare is a social democratic thing that they did, and that is good and that is fine. But doing some good things as a social democratic party, which is what you're supposed to fucking do, doesn't cancel out all the neoliberal shit you did, such as privatization, such as handing so much over to the market, cutting taxes on rich people and businesses, user pay systems, corporatizing a whole bunch of government organizations. Keating loves markets. He loves markets, and he was very happy to surrender huge amounts of public wealth and assets over to the private market. It's neoliberalism 101, honey. And no, it's not exactly the same as Margaret Thatcher and Reagan. In many ways, I was writing about this the other day in my book, real wages fell further under Hawke and Keating during that Accord process than they did in the US and the UK at the same time, because unions were actually fighting. Like the enemy was very clear, whereas in Australia, the call was coming from inside the house. And when Labor introduced the Accord and disciplined the union movement, then workers got pretty fucked over pretty quickly.
What do you think of Adam Bant? Then his response being very debate me, bro, then debate me. He said in a response media release, Paul Keating's got a sharp tongue but a short memory. If Paul Keating thinks the Greens and not the Liberals are Labor's enemy, it just proves my point. Paul Keating is Labor's patron saint of privatisation. Paul Keating has never seen a public asset he didn't want to privatise. He kept wage growth low and cut public spending while giving big corporations and the very wealthy a tax cut. And apparently, challenged him to a debate about neoliberalism, which on the one hand, I'm like, I like it because I'm like, yes, obviously he's a fucking neoliberal. Labor's a neoliberal party. That would be fun. But also maybe we shouldn't be straying into debate me on fucking neoliberalism. That's not really the work of let's bring it back a little bit. Come on.
That would be a waste of everybody's time. I'm sure Paul Keating's never admitted he's wrong on any front at any point whatsoever.
That's true.
Leo Puglisi said he's happy to air this debate on 6 News AU if it ever happens, which would be great. But it's so great. Victoria Fielding, formerly Vic Rollinson, who is, of course, the original Drip, one of the leading Drip voices in our community, on Twitter, did tweet, isn't it interesting how it's only those people outside the Labor Party who want to bash Labor by calling them neoliberal, when everyone on the inside agrees neoliberal label is a gross misrepresentation? Isn't that interesting?
So interesting. Isn't that interesting?
Isn't that
everyone else thinks something about my party that I don't think is true.
But who I'm in the party and who I need to like the party in order to just keep all my contradictions in my head, to ignore them and make sure they don't resolve themselves. Yeah, no, I don't think that they're bad. The thing that I like isn't bad. Isn't that weird?
Yeah. Anyway, the big ticket item this week, Tom, shall we talk climate bill? It's happening. It's a go.
What?
That's right. It passed the lower house, and effectively, the Senate will now be a little more than a formality after the Greens agreed to support the bill after securing a number of concessions from the government. So as I understand it, all of those amendments, the concessions that the Greens won and, independents as well were able to secure were affected in the lower house, House of Reps, and then it'll go to the Senate. to pass.
Yes, and during his speech, Adam was sort of laying out, he announced the fact that they were going to support it on Wednesday for the vote on Thursday, and sort of said, okay, this is what we got. This is what we will manage to extract from this bill. This bill, which solidifies the 43% reduction on 2005 emissions levels by 2030 and net zero by 2050. Which, as previous listeners of this podcast will know, is bad and not enough.
Yes.
But so Greens say, okay, we're going to support this bill. Here is the concessions we managed to extract through the negotiation process. We turn it into a genuine floor, not a ceiling, so it can't go below 43% by 2030. There's a ratcheting up mechanism to actually make the ambition. Yeah, so it isn't a ceiling, so you can actually increase the ambition between now and 2030. It's been Dutton-proofed, and I really fucking hate saying that. I think it's really lame, but I understand it's sort of just like a pithy little way to say that you protect it from future climate deniers and bad governments who can't overturn this. So that is a good thing. There's a clearer role for the Climate Change Authority in setting future targets. I believe they have to listen to the best available science in order to do that. I'm sure there's no way a Labor government would possibly get around any politically inconvenient scientific targets that are recommended to them by the authority.
And isn't it something, like it has to do more reporting. It does like annual reporting and the government has to listen to it, or it reports maybe towards the end of the term, and Labor has to explain why they're not going to follow the advice if they don't. Right. Something like that.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, okay, that's good.
I don't know if that's a Climate Change Authority. There's a bunch of different authorities.
Well, yeah, and there's the reporting thing, which was always part of the bill, which is, Chris Bowen will come back to the Parliament every year and explain what they're doing. I guess kind of like the close the gap thing, which we all know works really well. Yeah, when they're like, it's like close the gap. And we're all like, oh, fuck. Great. That's going well. Fucked. Yeah. How about you close the gap between 43% and 75%? The thing that, I'm hanging on to for hope, and I think is really great, is that government agencies have to consider the climate targets in funding decisions. So that's Infrastructure Australia and Export Finance Australia, which are government agencies that have previously allocated public money to fossil fuel projects. So they are bound by this legislation to consider the climate target, which means that it would make it harder for those agencies to approve fossil fuel projects going forward. So that's kind of good. Also, Adam sort of said a general understanding, this is much more vague, I think, but like moving forward, an understanding or an appreciation of the fact that moving forward, Greens are going to push for things on designing the safeguard mechanism, which is the whole sort of process that Labor's going to use to try and reduce emissions. This is the mechanism that covers in the 215 biggest emitters in the country. They're going to push for a climate trigger into environmental laws so that environmental projects have to consider the climate impact moving forward. This is what the Greens are pushing for. This is not guaranteed by this bill. And potential support for something like a transition authority so that coal and gas communities can move out of fossil fuels with government support. Transition authorities have worked around the country and around the world before. Greens have made a big part of their policy, and that's what they're going to push for. Yeah. And I suppose, Adam summed it up saying the Greens have improved a weak climate bill, but the fight to stop Labor from operating new coal and gas mines continues. And in this parliament, the only obstacle to greater climate action is Labor. Emerald Moon. Yeah. Is this a capitulation? Did the Greens sell out? Have we fucked it up? What do you think? I had a moment I'm having a moment where I'm checking myself and going, oh, am I a rusted on, a mossed on, whatever? Because it genuinely, it hadn't occurred to me. I have to admit, it hadn't occurred to me that people would be mad that we're supporting the bill, that we're allowing it to pass. It genuinely hadn't occurred to me. And so seeing the critique is interesting to me, that people, some people are they folded. This isn't what I voted for. This is so disappointing. Why would you support a weak bill? But I don't really understand what the argument is there. When I think about it, we make decisions all the time about whether or not to support when we're not in government, right? If we're only on the crossbench, we're making a decision about whether or not to support the changes that a government is proposing through its bills. It's a different position than being in government or than proposing our own policy. So I think that what people are doing here is trying to draw parallels between what the Greens have done and what Labor do when people get mad at them for not being progressive enough. And that's how I check myself, right? I'm like, am I doing what Labor supporters do by making excuses? We're not the government. Yeah, making excuses for my party. And what was so funny? Not the government. Yeah, but I mean, I don't know if you saw, John Kudelka was
like turned the rusted on bingo card green and was responding to Green supporters making excuses with the bingo card. And it's true, they were using the bingo card things. I was like, honestly, this is pretty funny. Like people are using those arguments. But at the same time, I'm like, it's actually just not the same. Like voting to enable a positive but inadequate change is not the same as voting to enable a negative change. So, for example, things like the stage 3 tax cuts or the religious discrimination bill, just to mention two of the most recent examples where Labor has actively supported something that will change people's lives for the worse. The change that the Greens are voting in favour of theoretically somewhat improves people's lives, doesn't make them worse. Because it doesn't, unlike the CPRS, which we voted against, it doesn't lock in years of like, it doesn't lock in weak climate action. It doesn't lock anything in. It leaves room. Like this bill, and I think Tim Hollow said this, a few people have said this, is really kind of inconsequential apart from as a test of, it's a political test, like, and it's a rhetoric test, and it's something that the media was interested in watching for how Labor and the Greens interact. But it's a little more than that.
Yeah. I feel many things. I found it hard to differentiate my disappointment at the broader situation from turning that into direct anger and disappointment at the Green strategy here. Like, I think it is important to sort of put those two things into slightly different categories because, you know, overwhelmingly I'm depressed that this inadequate, shitty, climate-destroying, fucked up, compromised, capital-pleasing, business-pleasing piece of legislation is being hailed as a fantastic triumph. And I think the bar is so low that it is perfectly reasonable why people who take climate change seriously and who want serious climate action could be really disappointed by this more broadly regardless. At the same time, yes, I think how much more the Greens could have achieved. I think it is really substantially different to the CPRS in that we went into negotiations. There was actually a negotiation process with the Labor Party, unlike in 2009, in which the Greens were completely shut out. So I think that's an important difference. And once Greens and Labor had that negotiation process to then vote against the bill based on then not getting everything that you wanted out of the negotiation process, that is a different calculation. That's a different sort of political strategy to adopt, which is like, you know, I think you're on much safer ground saying we weren't negotiated with whatsoever and we think this bill fucking sucks, so of course we're going to vote it down, compared to we went into a negotiation process, we got some concessions and we're still going to vote it down even after everything that's happened with a, you know, shitty Conservative government fucking up the climate for so long. I think that is sort of those two different scenarios. Some other things that made me feel a little bit better was Adam describing it as round one. He was clearly setting it up as like, you know, this is just one thing of this 3-year parliament. It's the first bill. There will be lots of other debates. The climate wars are not over. We're going to keep fucking fighting them. He said, did we get everything we wanted? No. Did we improve a weak climate bill? Yes. And are we a step closer to stopping new coal and gas? And he argues, yes, because of the restrictions that are there and setting up the future fights. So, you know, 6 out of 10.
Which again is the main game. Like I still believe, like the fucking target, which is what this bill is primarily about. It is the smallest of things in the scheme of the climate wars, should I say. Like, yeah, I guess the alternative is that the Greens held out and were like, no, you're not giving us enough concessions. We're not going to support it yet. We're not going to support it yet. Either Labor, so then it's up to Labor to just say, okay, well, we'll hold out too, and maybe there's a stalemate, maybe we won't introduce it yet or whatever, but more likely to introduce it and leave it to the Greens to vote against it in the Senate. And I just think Labor had so much less to lose here. Thinking about this, like this debate is one of the few, or it has been one of the few kind of big political issues where the Greens are a major player in a long time. And that's because climate change and the environment is a Greens issue, right? That's still the fundamental thing that people associate with the Greens. This was like a test for us and one of the very few opportunities we get to prove our chops, and one of the few things that people will base their perception of us on. Labor gets everything else. They're in fucking government. Like they will have so many chances to prove themselves. This is kind of a small thing in the scheme of it for them. So it's like, I think they absolutely, like if we had held out, that Labor were in a much stronger position than us, in that they would lose less from us voting against the bill than we might lose in that situation. And obviously they knew that.
Yeah, and would obviously use that as a political attack forever. Once again, it would be CPRS redux to be used, to be rolled out between now and the next election, for sure.
I think what Tim Hollow said in particular, where he said that the Greens had reversed the pressure, is the key point, because it's true. Like, the pressure was very much all on us at the start. You would have known it was all about, will the Greens do this? Will they be, an obstacle to climate action? Greens.
Yeah,
it has completely shifted to, will Labor stop approving new coal and gas mines? Like, I genuinely think that has been flipped, and the pressure on them is now to do more. The pressure is kind of off us, for now. I'm sure it will come back to us. Will we support this thing or that thing?
A really good point, actually. I mean, yeah, Sarah Ferguson was interviewing Chris Bowen on 7:30 last night, and yes, this same contradiction that the Greens have been banging on about for fucking ages, which is, you say you're serious about climate action, what does that mean for these massive fossil fuel projects? Like, that is being popularized, that's being talked about, and you're right, that contradiction is being brought to the fore. And yeah, as much as possible, both the Greens and the broader media establishment should absolutely hold the government's feet to the fire on that, because yes, you cannot do both. You cannot have both, I'm afraid.
No, and at the end of the day, yeah, that's the thing. I was thinking about this line that I was using a fair bit towards the end of the most recent election campaign, when I was door knocking with people who were just completely disenchanted with the political process, just didn't want to hear it, didn't want to vote for anyone, or just didn't trust politicians in general. And I would say, well, you've got to vote for someone, right? And like, that's the thing. Yeah, this was a shit fucking process. It was a shit offering. It's a shit context. Australian Parliament and politics is shit. But if the Greens are offered a choice to vote to change our emissions reduction target from whatever 26 to 43, like, yeah, I guess vote for it. We should be looking at instances where someone has actively voted against something good, like, for example, Allegra fucking Spender, a quote-unquote climate-independent neoliberal who voted against the Greens' amendments to stop new coal and gas mines being approved.
Right.
She voted for new coal and gas, a fucking climate independent. Simon Holmes a court, come get your fucking politicians. Like, are you kidding?
But those amendments weren't sensible. All right,
Emerald? Yeah, right. Not sensible.
I mean, this is an important point to make. Like, the Greens did try to amend the bill. They passed an amendment to increase the target to 75% reduction, and also to stop new coal and gas. And yes, they were not supported by the government and voted down by a bunch of wacky climate independents. Apparently, some of them were supported and some of them weren't. But that effort was still made. Adam identified the big gas projects like Scarborough, like Beetaloo, and the Narrabri gas fields as like, these are the big projects that we're targeted on. The government has since said that we will not be changing the safeguard mechanism to stop those kind of projects. So as Adam says, I guess the fight goes on to stop these projects. And as you say, the pressure is now on the Labor Party, and we should try and fight that as much as humanly possible.
Yeah. And they clearly know the pressure is on, because at the end of the week, interestingly, Tanya Plibersek, Environment Minister, says that she's going to stop a new coal mine from going ahead.
Hooray!
Which is fucking fantastic, and a very rare thing, because of the fact that we don't have a climate trigger in our environmental laws, and our federal environment minister generally only considers things on the basis of, is it going to pollute things? Is it going to fuck with water? Is it going to whatever? Which, it's worth, I think, again, because it is so incomprehensible to any person living in 2022 that the federal environment laws don't consider climate. It bears repeating. Even this decision about Clive Palmer's Central Queensland coal project, where Plibersek says that she intends to reject it, it's nothing to do with climate. It's because it's too close to the Great Barrier Reef, and she thinks it'll have impacts on the reef and on water in the area.
Which, she's not wrong. And again, if the coal mine doesn't go ahead, then whoop-de-doo. But yes, the idea that this decision was being pointed to as if our environmental laws are sufficient, and a lot of the reporting really did sort of minimize or downplay the fact that this was not because of the climate impact of that coal mine, which was, again, very frustrating, a very frustrating sort of win that wasn't illustrating what actually is going on here. And that was fucking frustrating.
Because there is confusion, Because, you could speculate that this does have something to do with Labor recognising that, approving new coal mines is unpopular because of the climate implications, but they can't say that because they, have to be shown that they're only making the decisions based on the laws. But I also think that not too much should be taken from this, given that Labor governments have typically not been that afraid to be shown to stand up to Clive Palmer, because Clive Palmer is not a popular person. And he's also pretty much he's associated with the LNP. The ALP loses nothing from standing up to Clive Palmer. He's not their friend. And similarly, when I heard this, I got confused because Palmer has multiple proposals in Queensland. He has this one, which is actually a smaller coal mine in the little Styx Basin on the coast, central Queensland coast, basically. But the big one that people might be thinking of is the Galilee Basin coal project. Galilee Basin being the same place where Adani is doing their coal mine. It had never been mined before, and that's why it was so fucking devastating when Labor in Queensland gave them their final approvals for Adani to go ahead, because it opens up the Galilee Basin. And now Clive Palmer wants to get in there too. It's more inland. But he also recently he's trying to build a new coal-fired power station in 2022 to power that coal mine, right, in that same area. And he tried to not even go through any state or federal approvals to do it under this loophole in the planning law. He tried to just get council approval from the fucking local council. He's like, I'm just going to go through the council. And everyone was like, this is fucking insane. Massive pressure from environmental groups. Eventually, Queensland state government goes, we're going to use our call-in powers under the Planning Act to call this in, which is where they are like, nah, we're taking it from council and we're looking at it because it's so significant. They still haven't they haven't stopped it necessarily, but they called it in. But my point being that, Labor standing up to Clive Palmer, I wouldn't take that as an indication that they're going to be stopping new coal and gas mines due to climate impacts.
Yeah, stand up to Woodside, who gave them $100,000 in the 2018-2019 financial year and is behind the $16 billion Scarborough project, please. Let's see how that rolls out. Also, Clive Palmer, where the fuck is Titanic 2, okay?
So,
when was our second Titanic going to be here? He pushed it back. It was supposed to be 2022. What the fuck, bro?
I know. Broken promises.
Finally, look, there'll be people who say that this is the Greens capitulating, this is the Greens selling out, and they'll be fucked off, and they should have held out for more. And apparently, the reporting was that there was discussion within the party room that some people were saying that there weren't enough concessions extracted and should consider potentially voting it down, and so that debate will play on. I'm sure. I guess I want to send a message of recognition and shared suffering, because it is deeply disappointing. The more you read about this, both this bill and the way that it's been received and celebrated by the media, particularly The Guardian, just saying this is an amazing day for the climate and Labor's always stepped up to the climate and this is just an absolute joy.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's deeply depressing. The whole thing is fucking depressing.
And again, we've said it many times on the podcast, but the thing that makes me like the Greens a lot is a rejection of bullshit and a strong preference to not say something that isn't true when you know it isn't fucking true. And there's just so many lies and bullshit based in this. Like Albanese got up during the debate and said, we have a great responsibility to this beautiful island continent that we live in to make sure that we act on climate change. This government will. We can tell our children that we stepped up, we took responsibility and we met the moment. And it's like, no, you didn't, motherfucker.
You will be lying to your fucking children. Yeah.
Chris Bowen said, it was like giving shit on the coalition for not supporting legislation, and jumps up and says everyone from Greenpeace to Rio Tinto want this legislation to be passed. And celebrating that is a sign of an incredible consensus. I'm like, to me, that reads as a demoralized environmental movement that is willing to sort of accept anything that comes along. And obviously, big capital that doesn't see it as a major threat or any kind of challenge to their business model whatsoever. So I just wanted to say that, yes, I completely understand if people are deeply dispirited by this sort of by this moment, and it's nowhere near as good enough. The extent to which the Greens can change that, given current conditions, is very much in question, I think. And the few extractions that were extracted are something to acknowledge and to appreciate, I suppose. But
and again,
if you're bummed out, it's okay.
And again, I caution against the over-reliance on Parliament as a measure of success of what our movement can do, because the real work happens outside of Parliament. It's about, like cleaning up fucking flooded homes. It's about building autonomous community power, politicizing people and getting them to like form, a movement that can genuinely take on the political establishment in and outside of that place, because that's what we will need to save us, not some fucking, tweaking of a shit bill that the Labor government proposes in Parliament.
G'day folks, welcome to The Glass House, the program that asks the question, even though today's anniversary of JFK's death is sad, isn't it good at least one American president showed a bit of brains?
Special guest alert, everyone. Big name celebrity man, Wil Anderson, beloved comedian, my friend, mentor, comedy older brother.
Wow.
Will is like incredible at giving a platform to and encouraging every single young comedian. He's renowned for this. He's very, very good at that. It's very nice. Wil Anderson, host of Gruen, host of Question Everything, Triple J Breakfast host, creator of Willosophy and a million other podcasts, podcasting champion, and Serious Danger listener, most importantly. Very kindly gave us a bunch of his time. We had an hour-long chat with Wil, and we talked about everything in the world, Emerald.
It was loose. It was fun. We had good conversations. We spoke a lot about advertising and capitalism and like the ideas behind the Gruen transfer. We spoke about Wil's political ideology, and we had a fiery exchange about journalists and people on the ABC who make a point of not voting.
It was very interesting. I'm neutral. I'm like a journalist.
Tom
I
tried to
don't
break
vote
it up.
either way.
Yeah.
It was a great conversation. Here's a taste of it.
Show me your property portfolio and then I'll make an assessment.
Good to know. Well, the other thing we want to talk about is the thing that I have talked to you about before on my podcast, Wil, but I think this is endlessly interesting and might also have some resonance for the Greens, particularly in one particular incident relating to Gruen. But, Gruen is this fantastic show that's been running for a very long time. People are very familiar with, of course, and has a wider remit than it originally started with, but was looking at analyzing advertising. Analyzing. I know words.
See, rich people aren't necessarily, famous people aren't smart. Look at Tom.
Hello. Analyzing advertising, how it works on us. And while this is never necessarily explicitly stated on the show, but the analysis we bring to it is like how it works within capitalism and how it functions as a bit of ideological manufacturing and has a profit motive to create all this often quite objectionable, but insidious brainwashing to try and convince us to buy shit that we do not need is a fundamental part of capitalism, right? Once you start producing stuff to make a profit and not necessarily to address human need, that gives spring to this giant industry, which is job is to manufacture the desire and convince people that we need all these things. We need to buy them. And if we don't have them, then there's something wrong with us or something wrong with our life or where we're going. So I don't know. I just love to hear you talk more about that, how you've seen the show evolve as a critique of capitalism over time and how you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely the starting point of what the show is. Like, I mean, this is a hiding in plain sight show. Like one of the things that we worked out very early on was the best way to get these advertising people to reveal their secrets because, 15 years ago, I mean, there's no show like it in the world, that only ever been like world's wackiest ads. The idea that there was going to be a show on the ABC that didn't have ads about advertising. The advertising industry generally thought it was going to be, what you'd imagine that show would be, a complete and utter critique of the advertising industry. And that would have been a fun 1-episode run. Like you could do 1 episode of that, but you'd never get guests to come back again. What we realized early on was that you would get people to be critical of advertising, even the people who make advertising, if you just didn't ask them the question as if it was an accusation. If you got them to explain what was going on.
How do you sleep at night, for example, is one question.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, great. Don't get me wrong, a very compelling 1-episode series. But again, like to me, that is very much singing to the choir. Like to me, it is about to get an understanding of it. You want to get the people who make it to explain it to you. And the only way you can get the people who make it to explain it to you is to use that spoonful of sugar approach, which is to not constantly be like, pointing out the critical line that you have through the show and just trust that your audience is intelligent enough that they can see what it is that you are doing, that you are unpicking something, that you are, making a critique of it in the unpicking of it. Like the only one that I ever have an issue with is when people really think that the show is a celebration of advertising, because the last thing in the world that it is a celebration of advertising. We don't talk about advertising in general, like as in the industry. We don't talk about awards. If anybody ever mentions that an ad won an award or a particular agency, blah, 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 that we've always cut any of that out of the show. This is not Mumbrella, the TV show. This is a show, as you said, Tom, that is meant to be explaining to people how capitalism works. Advertising is the poetry of capitalism, right? That's what it is. And so to understand capitalism, you've got to understand the myths around capitalism, and that's what advertising is. I mean, we talk about misinformation, the biggest issue in our society at the moment being misinformation. And we talk about the idea that there are these algorithms, and these algorithms follow us around, and they can start to understand what it is that we are motivated by and how to motivate us. Those algorithms don't just follow us around the internet because they're curious, about our day. I wonder what Tom Ballard's up to.
Don't look into it. Don't look into it, algorithms. Don't worry about it.
At the heart of all this is advertising. The only reason that they track you, the only reason that they have that monetization process, the only reason that they want to know if you spend 3 seconds looking at that ad versus 5 seconds looking at that image versus 10 seconds looking at that is so that eventually they can sell that information to someone who can then sell something to you. Now, that something can be a product, or it could be a political ideology, or it could be, anything that motivates you as soon as they have this information. But it's all advertising. It's all advertising and marketing. And of course, that has meant that news websites have had to use more sensational click-through headlines. They've had to lean into stories that have more popular appeal. That's not because one day these newspapers decided we don't want to do real news anymore. We want to talk about Kim Kardashian every day, or which, child star is now unrecognizable. They didn't make that decision. It wasn't like journalists were sitting around going, you know what I really want to write about every day? Abby Chatfield. Just every day. I want to write about Abby Chatfield every day. The reason, and that's no diss to Abby Chatfield, by the way. She seems real cool. But the point being, they didn't wake up one day and make that decision. Advertising and marketing made that decision, because the model is based on the more click-throughs you get. That's how the advertising model works. You get through to that page. So the more that they can hook you through with a misleading headline to get you to click on that page, that's not because the newspaper wants to trap you. It's because the newspaper wants you to see an ad.
It's funny that, that critique of advertising and marketing, which you just laid out, in terms of the impact that as an industry has on our lives, and particularly the kind of media that's available to us and the way that the journalism and news works now. I mean, that applies equally then to advertising and marketing that is used by and for capital. And it applies equally to advertising and marketing from a political movement or even an anti-capitalist movement. I always think about, because I think, I get pissed off at advertising when I see it as a mouthpiece of or a reflection of capitalism, the cooked ads that are like, here's how, want love, want peace, they, thems and she's, here's our fucking product. And that's that is awful to me. But it is interesting that even though everyone agrees advertising sucks and that it is becoming overwhelming, and you look at dystopian movies and shows, there is often that thread where you cannot escape advertising, the Black Mirror episode where there's always ads showing, et cetera, but there's no it's not that prominent in left politics. The Greens aren't really that often going up against the advertising industry. Because we advertise, right? Do you think in an ideal world, it's can we still have Greens ads? Can the workers have ads?
This is that. And I know that you guys know exactly what this is, but that's the equivalent of saying those kids should be marching for the climate because they've got mobile phones. We exist in the system. The system is run by advertising, and if you want to compete with those who are advertising, then you have to advertise. There is no value to the Greens at the moment to be able to say we are going to step out of the system that is running everything. It doesn't make any sense. But can you critique the system while still using the system? I think absolutely 100% you can, and you have to. That's the greatest thing the system, can do is like disenfranchise you from the system, right? They want you to because they know that once you're out of the system, then you're silenced, realistically. So no, you still have to be there. But we don't talk about it even in there's really practical examples of this. I mean, obviously the Greens, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but sometimes people from the ALP blame the Greens for us not doing enough on climate change in this country. No? Yeah, I know, it's weird. But I mean, the thing that so often does not get talked about, and which I just find hilarious, is the mining tax, which the super profits tax, right? Which would have revolutionized this country, because we had an industry that was, regardless of, the fact that it was probably well past the time that industry should have been going as strongly as it should. It had stopped us from going into a global financial crisis. These companies were making super profits out of the mining industry, and most of those super profits were not going back to Australia. And at that time, there was a proposal that basically said, let's take these super profits, or some of these super profits, and we're going to put them into a fund that not only is going to benefit, the rest of the country, but we're also going to come up with a transition plan to use this money, these super profits that they're currently making, to make sure that all these people who are working in these industries will be able to have other jobs in renewable industries. And we're going to put this money into making Australia, because this is the thing. We're playing catch up now, but Australia has always been in a perfect position for renewable energies. Most of the time, what you need for renewable energies is either water, wind, or sun. And Australia has all of those things in huge quantities, right? So we could be the Kuwait of renewable energy. And we had an opportunity where we had all this money from the super profits that the government had a proposal to go, we're going to take some of that money, we're going to use it to transition, we're going to use it for the betterment of all. It was a good idea. And the reason that idea does not exist to this day is advertising. 100%. People can tell you whatever else they want to tell you about why that didn't get up. There was one reason and one reason only that did not get up: advertising.
There you go. That is us in conversation with the lovely Wil Anderson. If you would like to hear the full thing, please become a patron. Patreon.com/SeriousDangerAU. The whole chat is up there for you right now as you are listening to this. We ask for as little as $3 a month or $5 a month, whatever you can afford. That, again, just helps us. Let's just be cute.
That's great. In this economy, come on.
In this economy? What are you crazy?
That?
Yeah, if you become a patron at $3 by inflation,
you're losing money not to.
Yeah. You also get the back catalogue of all the old extra bonus content that we put out there as patrons as well. Patreon.com/SeriousDangerAU
Serious
to listen
Angels.
to the full Serious Angels AU to listen to the full chat with Wil Anderson. Do it now, everybody. Thank you.
This is big. This is little. Big little. Clap, clap, clap.
Hey, call to action. Something that you could do is come watch me tell jokes.
Sorry. Hey. Go ahead.
Hey, it's the big unit. T-Ball here.
Yeah.
Come see my comedy show. This is the last time I plug it. I'm sorry, I know I've been banging on about it. But Comedy in the West is happening on Saturday, August 13th. If you're in Melbourne and you want to come out to the West, see myself, Dave Thornton, Geraldine Hickey, Kirsty Wiebeck, Dilruk Jayasinger, Jordan Barr, Harley Breen, raising money for the Greens Western Metro Upper House campaign at the upcoming Victorian state election. It's at Kindred Studios. Link in the show notes. Come on down. Saturday night. Fucking fun. Ha ha ha. Raising cash for the Greens.
Come on down, y'all.
Come on down. That'd be good.
And if you're looking for something else, another action to take, if you can't make it to that fundraiser, the Tomorrow Movement, who you may remember from fucking children showing up at the first week of Parliament getting dragged out by security, are fighting for real climate action and for a transition for workers. You can head to their website, tomorrowmovement.com. If you're a young person, join the movement. They have introduction sessions online where they will actually step you through the strategy and what you can do to help. If you don't want to actually join the movement itself, you can support it in a bunch of other ways. They've got a few launch events coming up. You can support them on social media, donate. We'll put the info in the show notes. And until then, remember to please rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. Last time I checked, we had, I think, 99 reviews, something infuriating like that. I don't know if that's still the case, but please leave us a review so that you can bump us over that 100 mark. You can do it wherever you're listening now. You can also go and look at the pictures of Tom and me being different sizes on our social media. We're on @SeriousDangerAU on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. You can send us an email about what you think about our different heights or anything else. hello@seriousdangerpod.com. For everything else, just head to seriousdangerpod.com.
Paul Keating, you're welcome on Serious Danger anytime. We will host a debate as well between you and Adam. Debate me, bitch. Pleasure to be back, Emerald Moon.
Great to have you back. Bye, you big unit.
Bye, you little scrumption. Scrumption? You little munchkin.
Oh, my sister calls me Munchkin.
Serious Danger Australia.